Although she may not know it, Anne Carson is one of the patron saints of Rain Taxi. I don't exactly mean the accomplished and much beloved author who joins us here tonight, but rather the Anne Carson we reviewed 16 years ago in our second issue, a then much less known writer whose recently published book, Glass, Irony, and God, made us want to shout from the rooftops, or at least start a magazine, that here was something utterly new in the well-worn landscape of literature. In that respect, of course, it is the same Anne Carson, since we and so many others have continued to want to get up on those rooftops. Though preceded by Eros the Bittersweet, which felt equally like a volcanic eruption in the field of the essay, Glass, Irony, and God was followed by an astonishing array of texts that appeared under the sign of poetry, including such works as Autobiography of Red, Men in the Off Hours, Decreation, and The Beauty of the Husband, not to mention the riveting translations from the Greek that comprise the books Grief Lessons and Oresteia, and If Not, Winter. Her most recent work is the aforementioned and staggeringly gorgeous Knox, an accordion-folded book housed in a clamshell box, which is both a word-by-word meditation on an elegy by Catullus and a heart-wrenching elegy in its own right. Anne Carson is a writer who is fascinated with dualities and contradictions. Her work is often strongly narrative, but the emotional chord it strikes is deeply rooted in language and lyric. It often derives from ancient texts that inform her background as a classicist, but it is relentlessly contemporary. It often deals with loss and grief, but it ultimately affirms life. And of course, there is the genre blurring for which she is so justly admired: the novel, the essay, the poem, the dance, the film, the treatise, the translation, the lecture, the opera, the artist's book, the autobiography, and more. All forms of creative expression become intertwined in Carson's unique vision of poetry. This too coincides with her fondness for collaboration. In the past decade and a half, she has worked with dancers, musicians, visual artists, and students across the country to push the art form of poetry in new directions. For her work, she has been honored with many awards, including the Lannan Literary Award, the T.S. Eliot Prize, the Griffin Poetry Prize, and a MacArthur Fellowship. She has also assembled one of the largest and most passionate audiences of any living poet, which is no mean feat. As Dylan Hicks whimsically summed up in yesterday's City Pages, Anne Carson tends to divide people into two camps, those who haven't gotten around to her yet and those who think she's a genius. Speaking from that latter group, let me put the bottom line, and I'm there at last, as simply as possible. Anne Carson is one of the greatest poets writing in the English language, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce her on this stage tonight. Please welcome Anne Carson.
Thank you, Eric. I feel a little overwhelmed by the introduction, but I'll try to pop back. It's a great honor to be here, and thank you for coming. And I think in the spirit of Occupy Minneapolis, which is struggling on those poor souls, I think 6 of them in their sleeping bags down at the, what is it called, Government Center in the cold. We should dedicate the reading to them, I think. And in the spirit of them, I'd like to start with something a little bit interactive, kind of on the model of their human microphone thing that they do with calling back in the crowd. This is a short talk. Short talk is a 13-second lecture on this or that topic. And this one is called short talk on reading. And how it works is I say my part, then you shout out your part, and it comes together to form a tiny meaning. So for this short talk, your script is the word deciduous with an exclamation mark at the end. No, a question mark at the end, sorry. Question mark, so deciduous, like that. So 1, 2, 3. Deciduous. Fantastic. Don't forget your line. Short talk on reading. Some fathers hate to read but love to take the family on trips. Some children hate trips but love to read. Funny how often these find themselves passengers in the same automobile. I glimpsed the stupendous clear-cut shoulders of the Rockies from between paragraphs of Madame Bovary. Cloud shadows roved languidly across her huge rock throat, traced her fur flanks. And since those days I do not look at hair on female flesh without thinking, deciduous. Thank you. That's part of my project to occupy reason. So I'm going to start with an essay. I've been writing sort of prose lately. This is from just a week ago or so. So it's called We Point the Bone, an essay on threat. Little tough ones, little tall ones like little tall trees, others yellow as hay, their tiny blades falling across the cracks, the stones. Blades moving a bit. There is no reason for you to wonder about this. Keep listening. Keep glancing out. Small grasses in the driveway. Perhaps following 2 lines of thought at once as a person does on the telephone on an ordinary day. Little grasses like that, pushing up, thrusting their way, can be expected in time to dissect and overturn the whole driveway. And how strange this voice you do not recognize is using your name, talking about you as he, saying he had an accident, very bad, taken to the hospital, very bad, hospital, must proceed at once. He, you. No ladders go up to this moment where you perceive the second person cut from the third person within you, and it all drops off into a past tense that will not have happened yet. Click, dial tone. The little grasses look weak and cold. Pity them. Don't pity them. Watch yourself. You didn't know the blades hung in your mouth. The word threat comes from Old English threat, coercion, and Middle High German drös, annoyance, also associated with the Latin verb trudere, to push, thrust, shove. People so pushed will leave town for a while, 6 months, a year, return quietly, see how things go, resume, as they say, normal life. Keep listening, keep an ear cocked. Wake up stinging. You will dream of a man who hastens along, pulling off a piece of his face as he passes, drops it on the sidewalk. Telephones are not the only way. You receive your own obituary in the mail. A person in black stops before you in the street, then hurries away. And suddenly, at 6 a.m, as if swept by winter rivers, everything changes. Your telephone, your kitchen, your driveway, all these things that had a notion of you now change their gaze and watch you from a different place. No, 2 places. Everything now happens from 2 places. You brush your teeth in the second and in the third person. You stand at the window in the second and in the third person, watching the driveway, waiting perhaps for your child who is late from school. You sweat from those places. So I was crossing the schoolyard one morning. Saturdays I go to early bike class at the gym. I take a shortcut through the yard behind the local school. The yard has swings and monkey bars and a sort of rough basketball court with benches for parents. I love the clear, empty light of Saturday morning. There is no one in the churchyard, in the schoolyard at that hour, except usually a guy reading a newspaper. The guy sits not on the benches but on the edge of a low stone retaining wall that marks off the basketball court from the swings. He balances exactly on the wall with one leg crossed over the other. He doesn't look up. It's funny, you can tell just from how a person sits reading the newspaper that he's off the grid in some essential way. Economically, mentally, who knows? I don't like to say homeless. He's not unclean. He wears regular clothes, a sort of sports coat. He has no collection of stuff parked nearby, just his newspaper. Yet he is different, sharper, sharpened on the air. He and I don't look at one another straight. I cross the schoolyard briskly, normally. He is on my left as I cross. I do not feel his eyes on my back when I exit via the little path that runs along the 6th grade science classroom, past the 2 old steel-cased doors, still marked boys and girls, onto the street. But that one morning when I crossed the yard, he wasn't there. I registered this with half my mind. I was a bit late and had put my t-shirt on backwards. The label was bothering my neck. Anyway, I kept going, stepped onto the little path, glanced into the science classroom, and was partway down the path to the street when something white that was pushing itself up through my attention on the left formed into a thought. White thing. Boys, girls. I stopped and turned. In the place where he would have been sitting on the wall was a whiteness like a pile of paper. I don't have time to investigate this, I thought. I'm already late, and I continued to head down the path for the street. A crease went through me. That's the way it felt. A piece of me folded over in a crease inside and lay flat, knife-edged. I stopped. I turned again. I approached the white pile. It looked like pieces of torn newspaper, words torn out, heaped on the stone wall. No, not words, single letters, a careful job of tearing. I was late for my class, but I had to stop, sit down on the wall, study the letters, arrange them this way and that. 9 letters. Alphabetically, A, B, E, D, L, L, M, O, O. Other ways. Dolombile, mobiolado, badly loom, blood meal, blood meal. I paused. I looked at the red stain revealed by my moving the letters from their original place on the stone. A dark red stain. Recent but dry. I thought about the bike class, gave up on it, glanced up the street and down the street. Quiet backyards in every direction, one behind the other, how deeply they nested like bowls of graded sizes, some empty, some cluttered. I am someone who knows about stains. It's my business. I do cleaning. Also, I have occasionally been engaged as an expert witness in criminal investigations. Expert witnessing is well paid. Much can be inferred from a stain. This one, for example. I glanced up the street again, vaguely expecting to see the egret, then remembered it had been kidnapped. Some rich people, a judge and his striking northern wife, who live up the street, have an ornamental pond. They used to keep a pet egret in the backyard until the judge fell afoul of certain local cocaine financiers and the egret got snatched. Ransom was paid. They slaughtered the egret anyway. Life went on for the judge, who persevered in his efforts to clear our small town of drugs. One day, the local newspaper published a political cartoon about the judge, his involvement in some municipal controversy, I can't remember now. And there in the background stood the tall, white-skinned wife, balanced on one leg in what looked like an ornamental pond. The judicial procedure was soon discontinued, technical reasons, and there went my hopes for a Christmas vacation in Rio. I had been scheduled to testify about various stains found in various places at various crime scenes, and as I say, the pay is good. But now blood meal was furnishing me with several points to consider. Letters cut out with scissors, not sloppily done. Different fonts, but all caps and roughly the same font size, so the word laid out on the retaining wall looked emphatic but amiable, not crazy. The blood, for it was blood, showed a stain pattern not created by passive drops, gravity, but swiped onto the stone, human purpose. Its viscosity indicating leakage from a lower extremity, not a major organ and not copious. It was a few hours old. The body goes dark, inside and out, at times. The mind shuts down. My mind started up again in a peak. Why were they threatening me with minor wounds to a person I scarcely knew and did not care about? This is meager, I thought. This is feeble. What a pallid degree of enemy I am to them. I was on some level insulted. Yet my reactions felt rudderless. I struggled to get hold of them. Let's review the facts, my facts. Mother and father gone, no children, wife, or waterfowl. Someone would have to grasp at straws to find a way of menacing me. I went to a conference of hematophonomists in Krakow last year. People who analyze bloodstains for forensic purpose are a varied lot, as you might imagine, but a kind of bluff stoicism seems characteristic of them. Queasiness not an option, pity not an option. Facts are what matter. Striding about the old stone streets of Krakow in the small hours of the night, I couldn't sleep, I was pondering ethical types. Every blood spatter analysis is proof that strength alone cannot earn you the world, you with your bludgeon raised. I can know you. I can read your trace. People who do violence or who threaten to do violence do thereby to some extent reveal themselves. My point is that, rising from the retaining wall and stuffing blood meal into my pocket, I began almost to enjoy myself. Matching wits is the best thing in life. It's like tits to me, both sex and nourishment. Clearly, I would have to rethink my role in the war on drugs, at least locally. Meanwhile, I was involved with worthy opponents. Intelligent, maybe not, but they understood close observation of facts. And their interest in the nuances of me would eventually show me their own. I felt cocky. I felt singular. I rose to my full outline, sharp and white against the day. No more bike classes. I opened my research. I got out all the old reports, began sifting the judge's data, working out a certain picture of how things went down. During this time, I stopped answering my cell phone and forgot to eat. There were a couple dozen packets of gummy bears in the fridge and some rye vita. I had subsisted on these. Also, during this time occurred the action at the schoolhouse. Here I had to lean my head on my notebook and weep. Our local schoolmaster, a brave and innovative soul, decided to not pay the spring semester's installment of protection money and see where that led. It led to a Wednesday in March when the entire student body, give or take a few kids home with colds or flu, was mowed down by machine gun fire as it emerged for recess. Those chubby advancing knees. Boys, girls. I was not enjoying myself anymore. Several nights I went and stood outside the judge's house and watched dark shapes move behind his blinds. The pond lay still. Threat is a communication system that functions best with a high level of noise. My research had narrowed down to 5 people. I found out a lot about them. Facts, every fact available. I used regular mail, priority mail, parcels, faxes, FedEx, a dead fox, money, and messengers in black. I used sulfur, pollen, beet juice, blackberries, meat, ashes, urine, rust, semen, feces, and blood of every type in my lab. I threatened everything those 5 people were or did or knew or hoped or had kinship with. I polluted every surface they met, touched, or saw in the course of the day, and every place their dreams went in the black sleep of night. I confused their categories and contaminated their information. One of them received a pizza with his wife's email password in black olives across the top, and his mistress's underneath in roasted red pepper. Next day, both women changed their passwords. I sent another pizza. Does it sound like I was having a merry and mischievous time? In fact, there was no mood I can name. Expert or not, it was all so clumsy. Nothing I did matched what they had done or tied off the loose ends of sin. I was flailing at trauma. I worked without realistic expectation of follow-through. I'm not much good at actual harm. Still, it felt better to me to live this way than to be circling my perfect calves on a bike at the gym. I meant to lower the quality of those 5 lives, just a bit, every minute of their lives that I could reach. Make a small mark, nothing sublime. You know that drop of the heart you feel when you turn and see stain. I lasted a couple of months. In ancient times, there were tribes who rode into battle shooting volleys of curses before them, little papers attached to arrows, such as those now fluttering down across my windows in a white storm. I do not see the wording. Feeling my way upstairs in the dark, some day I can't remember morning in, old mothy smell in my nose. How I hate carpeted stairs. Why have I never replaced those stairs? I imagine the old tried and true language. We curse your night and day, we take your blood away, we point the bone. They will arrive this evening or possibly tomorrow. If I call, don't pick up the phone. Let me leave a posthumous message. I've always wanted to do that. That's it for prose. I shall now read some translations of my favorite Roman poet Catullus. He lived in the 1st century and sort of invented lyric poetry for the Romans. I'll read the Latin title of each one, which is the first line of each one. They didn't have titles in Latin verse. First, Salve nec minimo puella naso. Hello, not very small-nosed girl. In this poem, Catullus compares an unnamed girl to his own love. Your nose is wrong, your feet are wrong, your eyes are wrong, your mouth is wrong, your pimp is wrong, even his name is wrong. Who cares what they say? You're not, oh, why can't I live in the 19th century? Iam ver agelidos refert tepores. Now spring brings warmths. In this poem, Catullus greets the season of spring. Now spring unlocks. Now the equinox stops its blue rages, quiet as pages. I tell you, leave Troy, leave the ground burning. They did. Look, we will change everything, all the meanings, all the clear cities of Asia, you and me. Now the mind, isn't she an avid previous hobo? Now the feet grow leaves, so glad to see whose green baits awaits. Oh, sweet, don't go back the same way, go a new way. Hesterno Licini dieotiosi, yesterday Licinius at our ease. In this poem, Catullus addresses his friend Licinius with affection. I guess around sunset we started to drink and lay on the floor writing lines for songs. That cold night smell coming in the window. I left about 4. Went home, opened the fridge, closed it, lay down, got up, lay down, lay, turned. Not morning yet. I just want to talk to you. Why does love happen? So then I grew old and died and wrote this. Be careful, it's world sharp. Kylie lesbia nostra lesbia illa. Our lesbia, that lesbia. In this poem, Catullus finds his own love gone to others. Nuns coated in silver were not so naked as our night interviews. Now what plum is your tongue in? Non quicquam refera putavi, I thought it no matter. In this poem, Catullus is in a disparaging mood about his friend Aemilianus. I've been looking up words for anus to describe Aemilianus's mouth. Arse, ass, breech, bum, butt, butthole, buttock, caudal appendage, croup, crupper, dorsal root, fundament, hindgut, posterior opening of the alimentary canal, rectal redbud, rump, umiac, withers, umiac, smell it. Good old Catullus. I'm going to read some now from Knox, which is a book that came out last year. Originally, it was a book that I made by hand with paintings and stuff in it, and then it languished for a decade, and then my friend Curry, who's here, figured out how it could be designed and reproduced as a book for other people, so we did that. It's a book about my brother who lived a strange life and died a mysterious death. And the book is sort of an epitaph for him. It's organized, as Eric said earlier, around a poem of Catullus, who wrote an epitaph for his brother, who died untimely. So in the book, I disassemble the poem of Catullus one word at a time, and put that word on the left page with the dictionary definition, and on the right-hand page something about my brother, so it weaves back and forth. So I'll read a little from both sides of the pages. And I'll begin with the Catullus poem in Latin. It's poem 101. Multas per gentes et multa per aequora vectus, advenias miseras frater ad inferias, ut te postremo donarem munera mortis, et mutam nequi qualoquerer cinerem. Quando quidem fortuna me te abstulit ipsum, heu miser indigne frater adempta mihi. Nunc tamen, interiac, prisco quae more parentum, tradita sunt tristi muner ad inferias. Accipe, fraterno, multum manantia fletu, at quin perpetuum frater aveatque vale. multas, from multus, multa, multum, adjective. Numerous, many, many of, many a, many people, many women, the ordinary people, the many, especially in phrase unus de multis, one of many, many things, much, to a great extent, many words, especially in elliptical phrases, for example, quid multa, ne multa, to cut a long story short. An abundance of, much, large, multum est, it is of value, appearing or acting on many occasions, assiduous, regular, used many times, of persons, too much in evidence, tedious, wearisome, verbose, occurring in a high degree, full, intense, multa dies or multa lux, broad daylight, multa nox, late in the night, perhaps too late. 1.0 I wanted to fill my elegy with light of all kinds, but death makes us stingy. There is nothing more to be expended on that, we think. He's dead. Love cannot alter it, words cannot add to it. No matter how I try to evoke the starry lad he was, it remains a plain, odd history. So I began to think about history. (1.2) Autopsy is a term historians use of the eyewitnessing of data or events by the historian himself, a mode of authorial power. To withhold this authorization is also powerful. Herodotus carefully does not allege to have seen a phoenix, which comes only once every 500 years, although he mentions the same old legends as Catullus. Herodotus likes to introduce such information with a word like legetai. It is said, as one might use on dit or dicitur. When my brother died, his dog got angry, stayed angry, barking, growling, lashing, glaring by day and night. He went to the door, he went to the window. He would not lie down. My brother's widow, it is said, took the dog to the church on the day of the funeral. Buster goes right up to the front of St. Johannes and raises himself on his paws on the edge of the coffin, and as soon as he smells the fact, his anger stops. To be nothing, is that not, after all, the most satisfactory fact in the whole world? Asks a dog in a novel I read once. I wonder what the smell of nothing is. Smell of autopsy. (2.2) My brother ran away in 1978 rather than go to jail. He wandered in Europe and India seeking something and sent us postcards or a Christmas gift. No return address. He was traveling on a false passport and living under other people's names. This isn't hard to arrange, it is irremediable. I don't know how he made his decisions in those days. The postcards were laconic. He wrote only one letter to my mother the winter the girl died. 3.1 My brother dies in Copenhagen in the year 2000, a surprise to me. 3.2 I go to Copenhagen. My brother's widow gives me some old diaries she found from his wandering years, filled with photographs that he developed himself in hotel rooms of Hyderabad, Bangalore, Amsterdam, Kathmandu, Paris, of the girl who died, usually naked except for some jewelry, a blonde, delighted girl. She was the love of his life, his widow says calmly. (4.1) My brother did not marry the blonde, delighted girl. He married two, that I know of, other women during those years, one of whom divorced him, the other is now his widow. It confuses me, the times overlap. What matters is they each adored him, with his blue eyes and broken front tooth. Light of my life, as his widow now says. And oddly into me drops this expression my mother used also. I can see her standing at the kitchen sink scraping carrots. For years after he left, she would glance up every time a car came spinning along the road. "4.2. She never got an address for him. Indeed, during the last 7 years of her life, he wrote to her not a single word. Eventually she began to say he was dead. How do you know, I said, and she said, when I pray for him, nothing comes back. "4.3. After that, we didn't talk of my brother. Hopelessness built a wall in her. I wasn't sure new feelings were finished arriving from him yet, but there was no practical reason to say so. It was a relief not to have him dropping through every conversation like a smell of burning hair, to be honest, from my point of view. From her point of view, all desire left the world. "5.1. What he needed from me I have no idea. When I caught up to him in high school, he was older by 4 years. He liked me to do his homework, but that wasn't it. My moral advice he brushed aside. You're different, he would say. He called me professor or pinhead, epithets implying intellectual respect, but we never had a conversation about ideas in our life. And when he telephoned me out of the blue about half a year after our mother died, he had nothing to say." This is a telephone conversation, me, him. "Me, mother is dead. Him, yes, I guess she is. Me, she had a lot of pain because of you. Him, yes, I guess she did. Me, why didn't you write? Him, well, it was hard for me. Me, are you sick? Him, no. Me, do you work? Him, yes. Me, are you happy? Him, no, oh no." Kinerem, from kinis, kineris, masculine noun, compare Greek konis. The residue from a fire, ashes. In medicine, ashes of various materials. Kinis cyprius, oxide of copper. Kinis lixiva, lye. The extinct or apparently extinct ashes of a fire. Hot ember by which food is cooked. The spent or smoldering fires of love or enmity. Ashes regarded as the result of waste or destruction. Troia, virum et noctium acerba kinis. Troy, bitter ash of men and nights. Ashes as a condition of the body after death. As a stage in existence, the grave. In sepulchral inscriptions, kinis hic docta puella fuit. This ash was a scholarly girl. 5.2. His voice on the phone was like his voice with something else crusted on it, black and dense. It lighted up for a moment when he said, "Pinhead." "So, Pinhead, do you attain wisdom yet?" Then went dark again. All the years and time that had passed over him came streaming into me, all that history. What is a voice? "5.4. My brother's widow takes me to the church called Sankt Johannes, where the funeral was held 2 weeks ago. It is white and clean as an eggshell inside. I like cleanliness. My brother didn't care so much. When he came to stay with me in 1978, 2 weeks before he ran away, the apartment got dirty, cigarette butts everywhere, and at last I was glad he moved on. One morning he butted a cigarette in the frying pan on the stove, sunny side up. 6.1. When my brother died unexpectedly, his widow couldn't find a phone number for me among his papers until 2 weeks later. While I swept my porch and bought apples and sat by the window in the evening with the radio on, his death came wandering slowly towards me across the sea. (7.1) I want to explain about the Catullus poem. Catullus wrote poem 101 for his brother who died in the Troad. Nothing at all is known of the brother except his death. Catullus appears to have traveled from Verona to Asia Minor to stand at the grave. Perhaps he recited the elegy there. I have loved this poem since the first time I read it in high school Latin class, and I have tried to translate it a number of times. Nothing in English can capture the passionate, slow surface of a Roman elegy. No one, even in Latin, can approximate Catullan diction, which at its most sorrowful has an air of deep festivity, like one of those trees that turns all its leaves over silver in the wind. I never arrived at the translation I would have liked to do of poem 101, but over the years of working at it, I came to think of translating as a room, not exactly an unknown room, where one gropes for the light switch. I guess it never ends. A brother never ends. I prowl him. He does not end. Prowling the meanings of a word, prowling the history of a person, no use expecting a flood of light. Human words have no main switch. But all those little kidnaps in the dark, and then the luminous, big, shivering, discandied, unrepentant, barking web of them that hangs in your mind when you turn back to the page you were trying to translate. Take the word entry as used of the arrangement of the contents of a lexicon. In one sense, it is a room I can never leave, perhaps dreadful for that. At the same time, a place composed entirely of entries. Is it not astonishing? Entry. (7.2) My brother's widow says she rented a boat and went up the coast to put his ashes in the sea at sunset near the castle of Elsinore. She threw sunflowers after. You know what they do, she asks me. They turn around on the water. Festive, I say, festive in their way. I'll end with the Catullus poem in English. Many the peoples, many the oceans I crossed, I arrive at these poor brother burials. So I could give you the last gift owed to death and talk, why? With mute ash. Now that fortune tore you from me, you, oh poor wrongly brother, wrongly taken from me, now still anyway this. What a distant mood of parents handed down as the sad gift for burials. Accept, soaked with tears of a brother, and into forever, brother, farewell and farewell. Catullus 101. Thank you.